Talk to me about some of the protocols you use in the evolution practices, and my outlook on how I train anymore is more for the lifestyle to wrap over, whether if it's daily function or performance. And my focus is always on the 6 essentials of living, which is our mindfulness, intellectual, creative, our breath, moving pranayama, moving life force through our bodies, our hydration, which life is born on, our nutrition, which grows life, our movement, which keeps life moving, and ultimately the restoration and the balance to come back around to be able to repeat that cycle. And I comprise nutrition and hydration into one, creating our 5 elements, and then tying that into more of the ancient Ayurvedic type of practices to identify personalities and characteristic types of where maybe we need to put more effort. And a lot of what I've uncovered is not only on the nutrition side, but I would say a lot of my practices have gone into breath practice for managing my nervous system, to be able to manage my psyche and my mental health, dealing with our nervous system being in really 2 gears of sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And when we're in that stage of mouth breathing, we're constantly pushing out the carbon dioxide that we need in our body to actually unlock the oxygen to give us everything that we need, the oxygen to our brains and such. And our society is so lost on this. We know that like too much mind is a bad thing, right? But what happens if we consume too much food? Well, we have the real epidemic in our world right now, the trifecta of heart disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and A1C counts being thrown off.
Totally.
If we consume too much water, we know that we can poison ourselves and it's toxic. And too much sleep, how do we feel, right? But yet, when we talk about oxygen, most people, the common sense is you're stressed out, take a deep breath. That's actually the absolute worst thing that you could do, because what's happening is as you're taking in that big gust of oxygen through your mouth, it's not being filtered through your nose and all the appropriate organ function that the nose provides. Now what happens is as we overload the body on oxygen, we're actually pushing out the carbon dioxide. So we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, where that carbon dioxide should unlock the oxygen from the red blood cell count to oxygenate our bodies. And again, we think of I talk about the gears of breathing. Gear 1, controlled, slow, in and out through your nose. Gear 2, forcefully in and out through your nose. Gear 2, in through your nose, forcefully out through your mouth. And gear 4 is full tilt. Bear is chasing you. It's oh shit mode, and it's in and out through the mouth. And that is natural. What's interesting is growing up as an athlete my entire life, I knew none of this, and always, big mouth breather, and couldn't understand why my cardiovascular system is always a challenge. Yeah. And now later in life, I have dealt with more anxiety and depression and different things in my mind that I now go back, hindsight 2020, and I know where I got derailed and started mouth breathing, and how that has put me, if we're in that mouth breathing mode, and think of how that connects to that oh shit fight or flight mode, bears chasing me, now we're releasing all of our endorphins and all the good things that we want to be able to fight out. But if we're always living in that point, then it's kind of like you're just running on the same tires and they're run bald, and you're just running through and there's no tread left. Our society is run through their adrenal glands, all of the endorphins that we need to keep our mind healthy. But the one thing that's not talked about is nasal breathing. And you go back to ancient practices with our ancestry, and oftentimes they sealed the lips of the babies after they fed them and forced them to breathe through their nose through sleeping methods. And it's been a lost knowledge. And I know that the reason why I bring all this up is because I know you're such a practitioner of breath practice, stress management. So I'd love to hear your, because this is a lot of what I talk about on flow. Flow is functional lifestyle optimization. So how do we optimize ourselves in daily living for mind, body, spirit, and also performance? So I'd love to hear how your practices play into that, some of your focus and whatnot.
Yeah, well, I agree with what you're saying. And the example you gave a really good example of like when someone says, okay, you're stressed out, take a deep breath, and you took this big chest breath through your mouth. right? Which is the opposite of what we want to do. Just like we're saying, when we breathe in through the nose, it allows us to do more belly breathing, more diaphragmatic breathing. And that's one of the first things I teach people. If we're doing strength training, people are a little bit off put initially because I'm like, okay, first session, you're going to lay down on the ground and learn how to do diaphragmatic breathing. And that's something that powerlifters teach, is how to breathe correctly, how to brace correctly, right? These super basic things. And that's taught in many different practices, in yoga and singing, how to breathe efficiently. And then that translates to exactly how we feel on a daily basis, the chemistry in our system. And I've done a lot of pranayama in the past. I've practiced a lot of yoga. I've done that for a long time. It's set me up for really good and easeful breathing habits. Yoga teaches that breathing should be effortless. But for very, very few people, it's effortless. It's either you're unconscious of it, and then you take some of those big, deep chest breaths when you try to become conscious of it, which doesn't actually give you the results that you want, right? Or we can be in this easeful state of mind and body where our breathing is effortless, it's smooth, we become conscious of it regularly on a daily basis, right? And it's those practices that allow us. That's why my thing is embody the practice. If you're doing a pranayama practice or some kind of breathing practice, it's a lot of effort at first. You have to think about it. Just like you start jiu-jitsu, you have to really think about all the techniques. It's a lot of effort. The more you train, the less you have to think. You can just go. So the more we invite in these kinds of breathing practices in our lives, then on a daily basis, without even having to think about it, our body naturally embodies that way of breathing.
You touched on a couple of really great points, even with learning and comprehension. I found myself in this place working on my breath practice because being really a lifetime mouth breather, and it wasn't until the last couple of years I've really started to pay attention to it, and especially within this last year because I've had a couple of performances in some jiu-jitsu where I felt like I hit a wall with some of my just flooding my system and wasn't able to really unlock that oxygen. And what I found is, first off, you got to be patient as you're adopting new breathing methods. It is not going to come overnight, and it's like nutrition.
Right.
If you want to lose 100 pounds, it's going to take you a while, and you've got to undo all those habits. And the one thing I say is 4 stages of learning or competency. Stage 1, we have unconscious incompetent. You don't know what you don't know. So if you've never heard this stuff, our society is blind to it. And that's the problem, is our society is unconsciously incompetent when it comes to breath practice because our educational and institutional systems are not discussing it. Yet it's arguably the most important thing that we can be discussing in our adolescence in day 1 and how to maintain it. And then number 2, we go into that stage of conscious incompetent, where now we know that there's something out there that we don't have, a skill, a technique, something that we have to learn and practice and develop. And then that 3rd stage moves into conscious competency, where now you're putting it in, but you have to be aware all the time until ultimately it becomes unconsciously competent, where it just goes into that reactive stage in its routine and its lifestyle. It's something that you've adopted. So I really like that you touched on that point, because those are some of the things that I really talk about. And incompetent isn't it like calling you ignorant. It's saying that you just don't know that there's something there, and it's okay. That's a good thing. Now you have a new quest. But to be patient through that process, I think, is really important. And that's why I want to touch on that, so that people understand those levels of learning. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time.
And that's one of the things that our practices naturally teach us, is that rhythm of life, like the actual rhythm of life. It's not like I have an intention and I want to make a decision, and then I'm just going to put all my effort into it and it's going to happen right away. Or I have an intention, I'm going to make a decision, but I feel like it's never going to happen. It's taking forever. It's like, find someone who's a knowledgeable teacher, who's a supportive guide in whatever you want to do, and let them support you in infusing that as a part of your life and taking those little steps each day to improvement, and just accepting yourself for where you're at. I like that you talk about how there's that unconscious incompetence. We can say that where there's no judgment. You know, if we're saying that to someone out there, there's no judgment on that. It's just the reality of most people's life circumstances is they're not exposed to these things, or maybe they just haven't made the choice yet to expose themselves to these things. But once that awareness is there, then it's your choice whether you want to take that. I don't remember in the Matrix if it's a red or blue pill
Yeah.
for the awareness one. I don't know, but you want to take which pill, right? But before those choices are handed to you, you just don't know. It's just not there.